Welcome to Biz Ops Exposed, the interview series that is shattering myths in business operations and uncovering truths that drive success. I'm Tonya Kubo, your host, and joining me today are two exceptional operations experts, at least in my opinion. We have Gwen Bortner and Sonia Narvaez. Now, as the founder and operations strategist in Everyday Effectiveness, Gwen actually has such a wealth of knowledge to share with all of us today. And of course, now I am struggling to add her to the stage. Isn't that fun and awkward? See, anybody can do this, including me. So Gwen brings 35 years of Biz Ops experience across 40 plus industries in which she guides founders to stepping into their power as CEOs. Meanwhile, what Sonia does as owner of Operation QOL is transform businesses at the ground level by organizing and optimizing their operations. And together in this series, what we've been doing is exploring the unseen gears of business efficiency and profitability. Now, today's episode asks a tricky question. It's not actually a question that anybody really wants to answer, but it is, what if marketing is not your problem? We as business owners, as entrepreneurs, and I include myself in here, are inundated with marketing solutions every day on this platform and on just about every other platform that we can imagine. And the truth is like sometimes marketing doesn't solve everything, right? I mean, hear me out here. I made the jump from newsroom management to communications and marketing back in 2007. So I know a lot about marketing, especially in the online space. And I know so much that I can tell you without a doubt that though marketing and sales solves a lot of business problems, they cannot solve all of them. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and it's no fun. So today I have asked Gwen and Sonia to help me test that belief. Since our last episode, I have been keeping a list of business challenges submitted by business owners. And I have to say, I am super grateful to every single one of you that submitted questions, that is willing to have these questions examined here in public view. I know that is not easy. And so what we're going to do today, if it's okay with everybody, Gwen and Sonia, I am going to go through the list. And you are going to coach me as if I'm the business owner with the issue, right? So I'm going to ask the question, but I've got a little extra information that was given to me so that I can play my role really effectively. And what I want us to do is just look at all sides of the issue. My hope is that by the end of this, you'll be able to give me some questions that I can consider so that I could figure out as a CEO if my problem is best solved by sales and marketing, or if it's indeed something deeper. So now the question is, are you ready? Sonia's like, as ready as I'll ever be. Gwen was born ready. Sonia's like, yes, I will be ready. I will be ready because I have no idea what you're going to ask, Tonya. So I want to start, we're just going to go straight for the jugular. I want to know about the worst case scenario, which I believe for most of us, marketing feels like an easy solution to every problem. Marketing in all of its forms, I'm going to speak for myself. It feels productive, right? It puts me in motion. It makes me feel like I'm moving my business forward. Even if I were to dig into my data and see that actually everything's not moving forward, my revenue's flat, my email subscribers are flat, like everything is flat, I still feel like I'm doing something and that feels good. So I want both of you to first answer this question. What if marketing isn't mine or my business's problem? Then what? We're going to go to Gwen and then we'll go to Sonia.
So I've got so much to say on this, so I'm going to really focus on answering the question. And that is almost always when you've started achieving success, when you've got sales happening on any sort of regular basis, when you're getting new subscribers, when you're having conversations, when you're doing any of this, and things are feeling like they're not moving in the way that they need to, that is your first clue that marketing is probably not your problem. Now, if you've got no customers coming in, sales and marketing is probably your problem. But it's kind of obvious. But once you start having some of this going on, it's what we use to get our business to, a base level. And so it becomes our go-to answer, right? And sales and marketing is the initial thing you've got to focus on when you first start the business. There's absolutely no doubt about it, because without clients, you don't actually have a business. So, it is the focus. But once you've had a little bit of time underneath you and you've started seeing some clients and whatnot, it probably means that you're looking in the wrong place, but it's the comfortable place because it's where it has gotten you success. It has the thing that's moved you forward. It has been that piece. And so generally that's when marketing is not the problem. And so where do you need to look? Well, you need to look at all of the things that are not marketing, which of course, my personal definition is everything that is not client facing is operation. So everything behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff there. And probably what's broken is somewhere back there. Now, digging through and figuring it out, that's often when you want to bring in a professional to help you go through that process, because there are lots of piece parts to that. There's lots of details, and figuring out where is the actual problem becomes the next problem. Did I answer the question? I really, like I said, there are so many other things in my mind. I want to when we say this.
I think it's a good jumping off point. Well, I was going to have you explain a little bit more about, like, you wouldn't have gotten this far if marketing wasn't working to some degree. But I do feel like, you explain that by saying, if you've got customers coming into the door at all, then marketing is working. Maybe it's not working perfectly, but it's working. So Sonia,
right. It may not be optimal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it may not be optimal, but
right.
it's not the thing holding you back, especially if it's like, I keep putting money into marketing and I'm not seeing huge shifts. That, that's the other piece that I always want people, that I want to ask people is like, so are you seeing the results that you expect to be getting from the investments that you're making in your sales and marketing processes, tools, techniques, methodologies, however you want to think about it. And if you aren't really seeing a shift, a positive shift, then that's probably not what's broken. It's probably something else. And if you want to get the value out of it, we've got to fix the other thing.
All right. Okay. So for anybody watching or listening, just drop a comment. Let us know if this is tracking. You can just put a yes or a no. But I do think that it's helpful. I understand that this is a little bit higher level. So Sonia, why don't you come in and give us your perspective?
Yeah, so I would say that I agree with Gwen on every point that she literally said. I am so excited every time I hear her speak because I'm like, oh my God, she's a sister. But in reality, one of the things that I think after the now what is take your clothes off. And by clothes, I mean your business clothes. Open up that hood of your business. What's going on? What's your calendar look like? Let's take a real assessment of what's going on. And, a lot of times, just as Gwen mentioned, it's something that you actually want to do with a professional, because guess what? Like, it's not always going to be evident to you, just like, like a zit on your face. You only know, like a lot of times we can already tell when it's ready to go, but like there's moments in time when, you might want to get a dermatologist's like real insight to make sure that it's just a zit and not a cyst or some kind of other issues going on. Right. So I want you to take off those figurative clothes of your business and look under that hood to make sure, we're trying to track, where is this coming from? What's going on? Not knocking on sales and marketing, right? Sales and marketing is incredibly important. It's, if you don't have clients coming through the door, if you don't have leads coming through that door, like aren't selling anything, probably aren't doing anything, and probably don't have a business. One thing that I love about, oh my God, I was just going to say marketing, which I don't know if I've ever said those two words in my life together, but I'm
rubbing off on you.
Yeah, I know you are. Is actually like not just the ability to kind of check off those marks of being like, cool, I posted today, I did my reel today, but of people knowing that I'm getting these things done, of acknowledging like, oh, look, great post, great that people don't do that when I've written my systems. Okay. When I write my processes for my company, like, I don't feel like I've heard anybody say, great job, Sonia. Like, my clients feel it and they're content. But they really, really, you know, like nobody sees it. So it's like not shared. One of the things that I always, you know, look at those little things, look at those. For example, we were just talking about Victoria's Secret, and I was saying that, like, you know, if they're measuring me and I'm getting 6 different kind of, you know, readings here, it's not necessarily, I'm already through the door, right? Marketing is already done. I'm in there. But now there's something going on with these processes inside the systems that you guys are using to measure me, the measuring tapes. I don't know what it is, but it's not coming out even every time. And that means the delivery sucks. I haven't gotten back in there in a while. So, you know, there's other things that we need to look at that will essentially likely be some kind of operational issue.
Okay. All right. So here's what I heard. If I discover that marketing is not my problem, okay, it's not the end of the world. There's other potential solutions. There's other problems I can look at. Because I think that's the other thing is some people don't know to look beyond sales and marketing, right? Because there's not a lot of education out there for anything that doesn't relate to getting clients in the door. There's a little bit of education around pricing, I would say, but that's kind of it. So, okay, so it's not the end of the world. There are other places to look. It's not a dead end. And it's almost maybe better if sales and marketing isn't my problem, that I identify that sooner rather than later. Do we feel like we're tracking so far?
And I want to just emphasize that piece is so often I'll come into a business that has grown really, 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 really fast. And the problem when they've done that, you know, their sales and marketing engine is amazing. Let's just be honest. You know, that's going fabulous. But because that's where they've been focused, the back end needs so much work that can become a really cumbersome, challenging issue that can also, because so much of it has to be rethought and reworked and whatnot, it becomes almost daunting in doing it. But if you're doing, you know, do some sales and marketing, it's going well, let's check on the operations. Some sales and marketing, let's, you know, tweak up the operations. Sales and marketing, let's adjust the operations along the way. All of those are then relatively small adjustments. And it's easier to keep the business continuity consistent, you know, and that growth consistent, instead of doing these giant peaks and then a little valley, then a giant peak and another valley. My goal is, you know, it's never going to be smooth. That's just not the way life works. But instead of having giant peaks and then valleys and giant peaks and valleys, I want to see, you know, more of just a little bumpy hill, right? We're a little higher, we had to go down a little bit. We're a little higher, we, you know, and so that it's a smoother curve.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. So I want to dive into the questions. And are we ready for this? Are we ready for me to hammer you with questions? Okay. So remember now I'm putting my CEO hat on here. So we have a hiring issue. Our company can't seem to hire the right people. And the problem is that when we're short-staffed, our managers fill in the gaps and then their own responsibilities fall through the cracks, or they overwork and get burned out. Now, when we do hire, though, it seems like new employees don't stay very long. Managers tell me that we need to do a better job of recruitment. I wonder, though, do we need to do a better job of hiring? Or, I'm sorry, of training? What do you think? And so let's see here. We'll start with Gwen, because I bet that there's a strategic part. No, you want to start with Sonia? Start with Sonia, and then we're going to go to Gwen.
Okay. So my goodness, there are so many things, right? And I can only give you this surface level, like some surface kind of responses, simply because I don't necessarily know, right? Like, until I get to look at your skin under that microscope, I can't really tell you the exact customized solutions, but I have some thoughts about what you said. I think it's important to look at all, like, avenues of your process, right? Like it could be the hiring, it could be the training. Have you gone through that training with your team? Are you just assuming that they know how to train? Because let me tell you that that's not true. So it's really important to go through your process yourself and practice, like with your team, with your staff. You could have a hiring issue. My question is, if it is recruitment, what do those job descriptions look like? What does your interaction with HR look like from the initial start? What's the policy of check-ins with people? How are we onboarding them? Like really, really important. And what are those tiny details? Because what happens as well is we love to say we've hired somebody. Let's throw everything and the kitchen sink at them. So great. You have 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. You're here full time pretty much. So now you're gonna be in charge of this, and this. And so like, let me know how that goes, because, you came on and your resume said that you know how to do these things. All of a sudden now somebody is just thrown into the water. And a lot of times that doesn't really work for anybody else but C-suites, because, C-suites have to be trained to deal in all different types of situations. So, we have to have the strategy, we have to have the execution, we have to have the wherewithal to be able to jump in and troubleshoot issues immediately, pretty much. But anybody else, they need much more introduction. They need much more training. There are so many tiny things that go into bringing somebody onto your team that most people don't even think about, and they don't even realize will affect that person's experience. How many times do you check in with that person? What are your managers actually teaching them? And what tasks are they actually doing, owning, delegating properly? Because guess what? Delegation is a skill, unfortunately. I wish it was like natural, because, as a big sister, like I was able to be like, you go clean you go vacuum, you go clean the bathroom. I'll sit here and watch. So, delegation I thought was part of my skills, but, even I had to go and make sure that everything was being done in a very, and I'm still learning, in a very detailed way, in a very good way in which somebody actually understood what I was saying. So, really what it is let's look at the entire journey as it is, like what it is now. How does your company do it? Pinpoint, where in this journey people are really falling off, right? Like it seems like they're getting in the door, right? So human resources is doing something in terms of recruitment. If they're falling off and leaving quickly, it sounds like there's, maybe something else in that later part of the journey, but you're not going to know until you actually like do a quality assessment of every piece of your journey.
All right. What would you say, Gwen?
So yes. And so I'm going to take it up, because my job is to always look at it strategically, right? Often there is a whole lot of practical pieces that are missing, which is really why I want to start with Sonia, because I think there's often some relatively quick fixes that could happen in all of those areas that Sonia's talking about: the onboarding, the training, the clarity, the delegation, all of that. And back up to the high level. My first question is I'm going to call it an org chart. I like to call it an accountability chart or a role chart. Is that actually the chart designed the way that it needs to be designed for where your business either is or just beyond where it's going to? So are you hiring for roles and positions that you needed a year ago in your business, and so they're not working out because that's no longer where you are in your business? You're at this whole different level in your business. We forget that we actually need to do some reevaluation and redesign of what are we looking to fulfill. And then based on that, back to the tactical pieces of, do we have a way to onboard them in a way that is appropriate? Do we have a way to make sure that they're trained? Do we have a way to be checking in and going through all of those pieces, and knowing what those elements are, also based on what level are they coming in at? so often we've gotten into the I'll say habit, for lack of a better word, of hiring relatively low level people. And the problem is we actually need someone higher level. And so we keep hiring in this lower level person, and they're not able to do this job. Well, that's not surprising, right? And so, but we don't know that because we haven't looked at the overall high level view of what roles do we actually need to fill. And I've watched this happen, with my clients at various points in time. The other thing I see happen is we get panicky, and so we make fast hires. And fast hires aren't always best hires. And it's not that they're just, breathing air, that they actually have some level of skills and whatnot. But we're doing it in a way that it's like, oh, we've just got to get you in, and so you get someone in, and they really don't have what you need, whether it's skill level, whether it's specific, task abilities, it's all of those things. But more often than not, what I see is the reason people are coming in and leaving is you're trying to fill a role that isn't actually the role that needs to be filled at this time. But you haven't been able to step back far enough to say, oh, the reason this isn't working is because I'm trying to fill something that isn't actually needed, and or isn't at the appropriate level.
Okay, so so I find it interesting that you both, from Sonia's perspective, we have to look at all aspects, right? So it's not an easy answer to figure out, okay, why are we consistently short-staffed when we hire people? Why are they leaving very quickly? And talked about looking at everything from recruitment process to onboarding to training. Like, what is that training? Is it long enough? Gwen, you mentioned, are you even hiring for the right role? Like, are we hiring the right individual to actually perform the service that we need to perform? What I find interesting, though, is neither of you brought up anything having to do with the managers. And so what I want to ask, because of course, I've been in management and I've worked for a lot of mom and pop shops. And so what I know as a manager who has had to set aside my own duties in order to do the mission critical work to fill in for people who aren't there is once somebody gets into the role, I'm thinking, holy moly, yay, now I get to do all of that stuff that has been backing up. And I want to get them trained and onboarded in 5 days so that I can go and do all of that stuff that has been hanging over my shoulder. And so I'm just curious, is there something there that I should be looking at differently if I'm the CEO?
Yeah, I'm going to jump on. I'm going to jump this time on this. And this is back to, you need to be looking strategically at what your organization needs to be looking at sooner, because when you wait until you need it, it's too late. Because good hiring, recruiting, training, all of that is not instantaneous. At best, I mean, like, if everything just completely lined up, it might take 2 or 3 weeks, when everything is perfect, because they're probably coming off of another job. So they're probably going to want to give a few weeks notice. Like you said, even if you had really good training process, it's probably going to take a week or 2 to train them to get them up to speed. So, you're at 3 or 4 weeks in a perfect scenario. How often does that happen in small business? I think close to never. So,
but that's okay. We can pretend.
Yeah, but it's not going to be the case. So when you start looking at that strategic, what do we need? How do we need to be thinking in the future? Then you can say, okay, in 3 months, we're really going to need this, which means in 1 month, we need to, in 2 months, we need to have it hired, which means this month, we need to be starting the recruiting process, right? Because we need them, and it's a working back process. And then what happens is the manager is only, for the most part, doing the work that they're supposed to be doing, which includes training, new people that they're managing, right? And now we're not trying to squeeze it in because we've had to stop doing all of this other work. Now, I also understand people leave, right? That, and so that creates an urgency. There's a hole there. But I also know that doesn't happen as often as we think that's the problem. More often, it's related to we haven't been thinking about this strategically. And so what we've actually done is the reason the person has left is we've just keep throwing more and more and more stuff on them. We haven't actually looked to say, oh, this role now needs 2 people in the role. We just know that we need this role. And so, and Sonia's amazing. And so she's just going to keep being amazing. And we're just going to keep letting her do her thing. And Sonia quietly is like, this is not sustainable. And yes, nice faces. You're awesome, Sonia. And so she starts considering other things. And by the time it comes up, there's usually too much, baggage and history and all of that. So the looking at it from a longer term also is part of solving the people leaving. Because most people, when we hire them, because of the type of businesses that we're doing, we're hiring people that we really care about and that really care about what we're doing. Most people would prefer to stay with us. They don't really want to leave unless it's a bad fit. And bad fits usually only happen because we're hiring an urgency instead of, hiring strategically with a thought process. So, I mean, I very much got on my soapbox on this, but to me, that really is where the issue comes from. Back to the root cause is not what people think it is. The root cause is
right.
Wait here.
Got it. Okay. So I like where we're going with this because I feel like what we've done now is we've given the CEO a lot of different things that they can be looking at, right? Because it's probably even not one thing, right? There's probably one thing that's driving all the others, but now at least they can kind of watch the recording if they're not watching us live, and they can sort of go through and say, oh yeah, that tracks. Oh yeah, that tracks. But ultimately, I think the big lesson for everybody, regardless of whether you're a solopreneur or you're building out an organization, is thinking ahead is important for every business. You don't want to think about what you need next week. You want to be able to think about, okay, based on where I'm going, what do I need 6 months from now? What do I need a year from now? And building up toward that. Did I just sum that up accurately? Okay, nodding, great. So we do have a few more hiring questions because I feel like that's really a bottleneck for a lot of businesses right now. So, but this one's a little bit different. So the CEO says, I'm buried. That's a direct quote, by the way. I need to hire help, but I'm not quite where I need to be financially to afford the help I need. I've raised my prices and I've sold more, which I love that they included this because that's what everybody says, right? Well, just sell more and then you'll be able to afford to hire help, right? So I've raised my prices and I've sold more, but I can't seem to get ahead. Help me. All right, I'm going to let you two duke it out. Who wants to go first? Just unmute if you want to go first. Oh, okay. So Sonia's doing this like air traffic controller thing, but I think what she's trying to do is say it's you, Gwen.
Yeah, I got that. I got that.
We should start from the strategy this time, and then we'll go into that second part.
So, no one's gonna like my answer, by the way. So we're just gonna throw that out there.
And me either.
Okay, so if you have hate mail, please email that to support@everydayeffectiveness.com, right? Because that's an inbox I don't check. So send it to that one if you have hate mail.
Right. Yeah. And our lovely person who'll be very kind will actually make a very kind response back to you, quite honestly. But the reality here is there is always this point, and it's kind of a chicken and egg sort of thing. I mean, to some degree, but there is always this point that you have to make the investment before you can afford it, because what's happening in what you described, and like I said, I love that she said, that I've sold more, I've done some of these other things, is the selling and the cost of delivery, which in this case is her time, goes up proportionately. And so selling more doesn't actually get her space, to do what she's needing to do. And often the selling more is not actually creating the space that it needs to. So the first is there's always a point you need to be able to bite the bullet. So you need always for your business to be putting some percentage of your income away. And I'm a profit first fan, and so there's ways to use that technique, that particular cash flow system to help manage that you're putting some money away, so there is a point that you can pay for someone that you can't afford for a chunk of time, so that they can get to the point that they're earning their wages, whatever their wages are. I don't care if they're contractors or employees, or I'm using these very generically, not in the specific form. And you also need to set a reasonable time frame to say how long until this pays off, right? So because sometimes we think this is the right person to bring in, and it turns out it's not. And so just keeping it going for too long also becomes problematic. But the other thing, and I've written about this before, and I've talked about it a lot with a lot of people, is most people assume the first person they need to bring in is a low-level VA. Get all that low-level stuff off your desk and make it happen. That can be correct, but it is not universally the right answer by a long shot. Sometimes you actually need to bring in someone who's pretty darned expensive, who can actually start doing some of the service delivery piece. You're like, yeah, but they're taking, that's money that I would be making, for myself, but it's so that you can free up your time. And the beauty of someone who's actually getting paid for doing service delivery is you don't pay them unless you've gotten paid. They're not just an expense. They're actually part of the cash flow. But now you freed up some time that maybe you can do the processes that you need so that you can successfully offload some of your lower level tasks to other folks. But the absolute truth is there's always a point where you just have to bite the bullet. I've rarely seen situations where it's like, yes, now I can afford this. No one I've ever worked with ever feels like they can afford it. Never. Never seen it. Whether it's, $100,000 business or a multi-7-figure business, it doesn't matter. There's always this point. And sometimes that means that for a short period of time, you have to make less to be able to do it. But you have to look at it as an investment, which is why you want to make that hire strategic, not just the common, recommendation of hire a VA. Like I said, it's not necessarily bad, but rarely does it work out the way you want it to, because you don't have the time and space to do all the things you need to do. Now Sonia's going to be like, oh my gosh, yes. And she's going to talk about all the specifics of it. So go.
Yeah, I know. When I first started working, like when I first became an entrepreneur and started the first business I had, like that was a question that I asked myself all the time, like I don't have the money to bring somebody in. Like, what am I going to do? I don't have the time to keep doing this. What am I going to do? Like, and at one point or another, like I realized I had to suck it up, for lack of a better term, because either like I'm an indecision is a decision, right? Like being paralyzed in this decision is also a decision in and of itself. So either way, like there's some changes that have to be made. And Gwen, I'm also really glad that you mentioned you could also hire another service provider that does, outsource that portion of it. Cause, that's one thing that's definitely like, oh, cringe. Like they could then steal my clients and, but that all goes into having the proper contracts in place and et cetera. So that's a different story. But I think it's really important that is an option, it's an option. And, hiring a VA is definitely an option, right? Hiring a social media manager is an option. Like, there are so many different avenues there. Like, it really does matter strategically. What is it right now that is causing you the most pain? And know that no matter what, I always hear this from people, like, I don't have any time to teach anybody anything. And I'm like, great, which means you're going to have to hire way higher. You're going to have to hire a more experienced contractor, a more experienced consultant, because those people are the ones who don't need much of your time. And they're more expensive. And so if we're having trouble hiring this, we got to hire this. But you also have to remember, if you're hiring somebody at $3 an hour, you're going to get $3 an hour work. Okay. So, like, there's a lot of people that I know that they're like, this person is $25. They should be doing exactly what the $50 people like do, because this is a lot for me, and you have to be really careful with that type of mentality. You have to be really careful about, sitting down and being intentional about your budget, your personal budget, your business budget, like what's going on there. And then from those numbers, like, maybe we can't cut something, maybe we can cut something. Gwen is totally right. Sometimes it's going to have to be your salary. And you're going to have to make some tough decisions. But essentially, if you hire the right person, you get back so much more time. You can then do so much more, because time is one of those commodities that you do not get back. Money flows, right? Money flows, it goes. Time does not come back.
All right. So this is great, because you don't know this, right? But this is a great segue to the next question. And then I have some additional questions that I will ask after this one. So this is going to be our last hiring related question. And what I just heard the both of you say is that, ultimately most businesses have to sort of stack the deck in their favor, which means they may have to hire help that they feel like they can't afford right now to ever get to the place where the cash flow starts to make sense. So now the question is, I'm hiring help, but managing them feels like more work than it's worth. How do I get them to work independently? So I feel like this is a great piggyback on what you were saying, Sonia, in terms of hiring. Gwen was talking about hiring the right skill set. A lot of times it's a much higher skill set than people think they deserve at their level of business. You were saying that they need to manage their expectations appropriately. So talk to me about this. I'm hiring help. Managing them feels like more work than it's worth. What do I do?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gwen.
No, you go.
Okay.
Go.
I was going to, oh Lord. All right. So, let me see your processes and how beautifully documented they are, because if you're expecting independent work, like, I better see bullets of information to the nth degree with nice images, right? Like, we need to have a very clear documented, process for how these things are done. So that's my first question. You want them to be more independent? Do they have that available? What other aspect, or what other tools, what other training modules, potentially, like any kind of videos, what do they have at their disposal that can allow them to be more empowered in their role and in what they're doing? A lot of times what I do is for new programs, some of these programs have incredible how-tos. I don't know if you guys, QuickBooks is a whole thing, but like, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at their how-tos. They're phenomenal. They even have videos. They have every bullet. They have everything you could ask. And it's great. So whenever anybody's starting new on something like QuickBooks, I'm like, hey, cool. Here's like kind of a list of how I would, go through those and then look at it. And then let's talk. Let's debrief. So how often are you checking in with them to make sure that they're getting all of the knowledge, all of that information that they need? Because guess what? They're going to have questions. And even if they don't have questions, they're having some type of like stopgap there, because there's something about your business that they might not know that they need to know, that they don't even know they don't know. So like, that's one thing that CEOs don't realize. We have so much knowledge in our heads about our business, and we make up so much stuff on the fly because we're the CEOs and we can. And, even as an ops person, and I have a team, like, I do this significantly. Like, it's unfortunate and I'm working on it, but like, I expect people to know what's in my head. So if you're looking to have somebody work independently, you better have as much as possible written down. You better have as much as possible accessible. You better have some type of tool in which they can communicate with you off calendar, like off meeting time. You should have a weekly meeting, if at minimum, especially if they're a new person. So what does it look like for you to offload? Like, what does that process look like? How is that working? Because if it's, either you've made a bad hire, right? And they're not learning anything, and that's a whole different, we just talked about that. Or your ability to delegate, or in your ability to have these things written out, or your inability to write all these things down, that's not really helping. And it's actually your fault. So you can't expect somebody to know all these things without actually going through the appropriate information, the appropriate, like making sure everything is documented, like I said. So those channels, those are all really, really important things. And I think it's something that as CEOs, we love to forget, because we're like, great, we hired them. They said they had these skills, and now they should just be able to run and rock and roll.
All right. Go ahead, Gwen.
Well, yes to all of that, because that really is the problem. And it is back to, are you hiring at the level that you want? And we talked about, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but it was one of the previous recordings, that the lives that we talked about. You've got to have enough guardrails so that they can actually make independent decisions that are the answer that they want. And you have to be able to allow them to make that decision and it not be your decision. So the number one thing I see with delegation problems is people aren't fully delegating. They're handing off tasks, but delegating says, and I'm just going to, pick on Sonia for a minute, just so we have an example, is that Sonia gets to make the decision ultimately. And it may not be my exact decision that I would have made, but it's close enough to what I would have made that fits within my, my business guidelines, that it's okay. Right. And so a lot of times when it's like, this is the problem, it's taking too much of my time. Well, it's because you're still holding the responsibility of the action. And, we shared the specific example, I think it was two times ago, where someone on my team had to actually take over a role that I had delegated to Tonya. That wasn't her role, but she understood that she could make this decision, that she could take this action. And it wasn't necessarily the way we wanted it to go, but it was actually 100% fine for it to be that way. And it was the right answer, right? And she also knew enough of the other things to know, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I am going to do that, and was able to make the decision. And I, as CEO, didn't know about it till way later. And it was absolutely the right decision. And so it was fully delegated. She didn't have to check in with me and say, what do I, but most folks, when they're delegating, they hold on because it's our baby. This is our business. This is our baby. We love our baby so much. And so we're afraid to let somebody else have that responsibility. And so that's usually where the delegation problem really happens, is they aren't fully delegating. They're just handing off a task, but they're having to check in so many times that's what's taking all the time, is these interactions back and forth, often every step along the way, which makes it even worse. But that big choice of saying, let them make the choice. It also means that some things will go wrong. It won't be perfect. That's just not the way. It's not the way that it works. And so you also have to have some grace and to be able to talk about, okay, this didn't really go the way I wanted it to go. Why did you make this decision? What piece of information, back to what's in my head, I haven't given you so that it would have been closer to the decision I would have wanted.
Okay. So I want to kind of sum up this conversation on hiring a bit, but I also have a follow-up question that I feel like we're talking around, but we're not actually addressing. So, the first question that came in was the hiring issue, but it really was about keeping people. And then we talked about, needing to hire help and not feeling like you can financially afford it. And then now we're talking about hiring help, but it feeling like it's more work to manage them than it was to not have them around. And so my question is, how do I, as a CEO, manage my expectations? Because I can tell you flat out that I don't know that there is some course out there, some training out there that tells me what is appropriate to expect of a new hire at every level. Like, I haven't seen that. So a lot of what you're both talking about is, Sonia, for instance, you said, okay, if it's more work than it's worth to manage them, then show me your documentation, show me the processes, show me the checklists, the bullets, because if it's not all written out, you can't expect them to work independently. So how do I know what I should, where do I get that information, or how do I manage my own expectations in terms of setting up my new hire for success, but also understanding what I'm getting for maybe the rate I'm paying or for maybe the title that I've assigned to the role?
Oh, if this was an easy answer.
You're welcome.
Because it's not. That's the thing. Because I've also learned that just because someone charges X amount doesn't mean they're at that level, right? So like, it would be nice to say, well, if you're paying this, then you should expect that. And if you're paying this, you should expect that. And if you're paying this, you should expect. That would be lovely. That's not the way it works, because there are people, I've paid higher rates to, $50 to $75, where I was really getting $20 an hour work. And there's people I paid $20 an hour that I was getting $50 an hour work, right? So that in and of itself is not reasonable, right? But I do think where Sonia went is part of it, is to say, how independently should they be able to work based on where they're coming in at, right? So, for example, if you're hiring someone who is going to be able to serve your client at a similar level that you will, that would also mean that they probably have similar level skills to you. They probably will be able to work more independently. Not always. Back to these are never black and white, kinds of answers, but on the whole. So what is that role? I also would never expect to pay someone $20 an hour to do the level of work that I do. And I think that's where some of the challenge comes in, is are you actually able to categorize your own work to say, of the work I'm doing, is this top level work? Is this upper mid-level work? Is this mid-level work? Is this lower level work? Because so separating in our own mind of, this feels like it's low level work. Why does it feel like it's low level work? Well, maybe it's low level work because you've been doing it for 20 years, but it's not necessarily low level work. It's mid-level work, right? So part of it is understanding what you're doing and how you're classifying it, and saying, and part of that is, quite honestly, why you need someone from the outside looking in. I've worked really hard for us to not be like, and you should hire us, because that's not what this is. That's not what this is about. But this is the reason you need to bring someone else in, because they can look at it more objectively, and help you think through what really is the low level work, what really is the mid level work, what is C-suite level work, what is comparable level work. And to help you think through then, what are those skills that we're specifically looking for? How do we actually make that happen? I say it all the time. Every coach needs a coach. This is the whole. You can't read the label from inside the jar. It's all of those things. And because it's all in us, and how we get our information and our knowledge and our experience is so unique. It's hard to separate those pieces out. But someone else looking in often can be, it's like, oh, well, this is this and this is that, you know. And if you're working with someone like Sonia or myself that come from an ops background, or anyone else that comes from a strong ops background, we can see it faster than someone else can.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I just think it was important to make sure that we address that pain point as well. So the next question. So now we're going to move away from hiring. Yay! We don't have to talk about this anymore. But so now the question is, we're backed up with clients. So this is what the CEO says: we're backed up with clients. Should we stop marketing until we're caught up?
No.
Okay. So Sonia, why don't you tell me why? And you know, we've got our last two questions, so I feel like we can get here before the end of our time. But give me your perspective. So why don't I stop marketing if I'm so backed up with clients, I'm overwhelmed?
Because marketing is a long game. And a lot of times, you know, networking and doing things, you're not doing it for tomorrow. You're not doing it to get clients tomorrow. You're doing it to get clients 3 months from now, you know, 2 months from now, 4 months from now. And I've made this mistake before because, you know, marketing was my least favorite item in the business or function in the business at one point. And so what I did was I just so focused on my client delivery and, you know, my internal systems and operations, my favorite part. And so, you know, I felt a sting 3 months later, and I had to really pick up the slack. And, you know, it taught me that we never stop marketing, but that does not mean that marketing is going to be our main focus at every moment of our business. I think that's the difference. You always want to have your system of marketing going, but you do not always have to be so focused, like so investing so much money into it that, you know, you forget about the other pieces of your business.
Okay. Thank you for that. So Gwen, I'm going to ask a follow-up question for you to address. So, okay. So you both were passionate in your response. No, you don't stop marketing. So if I'm backed up with clients and I'm overwhelmed and I shouldn't stop marketing, well, then what do I do, Gwen? What's my answer?
So there's multiple answers, of course, because there's always multiple answers. That's, you know, that's core to my belief. But part of what Sonia said, I think, is really important is you may want to ease up on it. And so the phrases that I like to use is pumping the brakes, just coasting, and not putting your foot on the gas. You know, and putting your foot on the gas. So it may be like, we're just going to take our foot off the gas a little bit. We're not going to stop anything. We want to keep the momentum going, right? And while we do that, that should free up some time. So that's the first thing is, you know, we're doing a little bit of this balance of time, effort going. But when you completely stop trying to get it back going again, it's a bad thing, right? So we may ease up a little bit, which should free up a little bit of our time. And the other, and I've watched this with numbers of my clients, is this is where you start looking of who can you bring in that can deliver some large portion of what you're delivering to your client, whatever that might be. And one of the things, and I think it's important to get into people's minds so they can start thinking through it, is I like to talk about it like a latte, right? That there's the coffee and then there's the foam on the top, right? You know, the coffee and the milk. And Tonya, you're way better at this than I am. You know what all the pieces are, but you know, because I'm a person. But there's the part that is the foam on the top that really is the part that you uniquely provide. And then there's a whole lot of coffee milk mixture in the middle. But we often confuse our value with the coffee versus the foam. And we think we have to deliver all of it and no one else can deliver it. But when you start really looking at it, it's like, no. There's quite a few people who can actually do the coffee piece. So what if someone else was delivering the coffee and you only delivered the foam? Now back to the first panic is, well, and I'm just going to make up numbers. I'm charging $500 an hour and they're going to want $250 an hour. And now I'm only making $250. It's like, yeah, but you're making $250 not doing anything. I mean, that's not true because you're selling and doing all the rest of it. But, you're making money without having to put your time in, right? And it's one of the things out of Mike Michalowicz's Profit First book is, would you rather make $50 an hour or would you rather make $5 for 100 people and not actually have an hour? Well, yeah, I'd rather have, I'd rather also have my hour. And that's where you start leveraging that, right? Is finding some other people that can deliver the coffee piece so that you can focus on putting your time into delivering the foam piece, which also allows you to free up the time to start bringing in some of the other people that we were talking about earlier on, of documenting process, getting things out of your head, doing some of these other things so that you actually can continue to build your organization.
All right. So last submitted question. Thank you. When bills are due, so this is the exact quote because I didn't know how to reword it, but when bills are due doesn't match up with when revenue comes in. How do I fix that? That sounds to me like a cash flow issue, but I'm not the opposite person you guys are.
Yeah, it is a cash flow issue. And cash flow issues people always assume is a sales and marketing problem, and almost never is it a sales and marketing problem. It tends to be an operations problem, and there's lots of places that to look in that. And so, one of the questions is, are your expenses more than your business can justify? That happened to me. Like, I'm an expert at this, and I'm actually really good at the whole cash flow thing. Numbers are one of my superpowers, but I was doing it to myself too. So, it's hard. It's sometimes hard to see that. What do you need to do to manage your expenses? That probably means your expenses are more than you can justify. I also have a client who has expenses come in and has earned income, but because of the industry she's in, her pay from the client is 90 to 120 days out from when the services are delivered, right? So this is also a cash flow issue because she's needing to pay her people, right? But she's not getting the money coming in. In that case, that's a place where you really want to use a line of credit to be able to balance it out for a short period of time and then pay it off when the money comes in. And it tends to only be an issue when she starts selling more business because she's got way bigger expenses coming in, but the money doesn't come in for another 90 days. So it's a short-term problem. So the question is this happening consistently? Probably an expense operation issue, or is it happening in spurts that are lined up with your business growth? Okay, that's more of a credit line kind of cash flow problem. And sometimes you need to go to a bank to get that, to help with that. Sometimes you can create your own bank that you can cash flow things out of, from time to time. But cash flow issues almost always are operations problems, and it's usually related to the profitability of the product/service that you're providing and or the expenses that are associated with it. And so that's really where.
Yeah. And so earlier you had mentioned Profit First. I know in Profit First, there's a recommendation, for instance, that you switch your invoicing, that you're invoicing, I think, every other week or something along those lines, and that you alter your bills so that you're not getting all of your income on the 15th of the month, but all the bills are due on the 1st of the month. So there are some ways to switch there. If it's truly, I was just going to say, if it's truly a cash flow issue, right, versus your expenses outweighing your income. Sonia, anything you want to add to that before we get to the end here?
No, I mean, everything Gwen said, I think is definitely an avenue. Your final avenue is to marry rich. But other than that, I mean, everything Gwen said was perfect. And I totally agree with it completely. And then those people too. I mean, this is a totally different subject, but I don't know if anybody has read Level Up by Stacey Abrams, and she talks a lot about that net kind of 90, net 120 industry, and what that really does to business owners. But that is definitely a different podcast or a story for another day. But what I will say is, yeah, absolutely. And the one thing is, like, get those terms ahead of time. Be prepared from the beginning. If you know it's a 90 to 120, you better have some runway. Like, you better have built in some runway. You better be prepared for some runway, and you got to be proactive for that runway.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. One last thing. So somebody's watching the show, if you just started joining us, then you're going to need to go back and watch from the beginning. But if they're watching, they're listening, and maybe the business bottleneck they have is one that we didn't address. What one thing would you suggest that they do right now to uncover the root cause of whatever bottleneck they feel like they're facing? So just like, you only get one sentence. I'm going to be ruthless today. So one sentence, one thing?
Keep asking why. Say, what causes this? What causes this? What causes this? What causes this? Until you get to somewhere where you can't come up with another reason what causes this. Get to the root cause.
Awesome. Sonia?
Take your clothes off. Take your business clothes off. Look under the hood. Look at what's going on with, like, just as much as you can, work with somebody to look under that hood, or, take a day, take your glasses off and look at it with different eyeballs.
Okay. So good. So to recap, what we really talked about today is, what if marketing's not your problem? And we went through several different business scenarios that could possibly be related to things other than marketing, such as hiring issues, being overworked, more work than you have actually available time or capacity to deliver, too much time spent managing the people that you hire, and then also that cash flow issue of bills and expenses and income not quite aligning. So what we're going to encourage you to do today is really just look at your business critically. Like Gwen said, ask why until you run out of answers. Sonia talks about taking your clothes off an awful lot, a little bit more than I'm actually comfortable with, but we get it, right? You've got to dig in. You've got to look under the hood. Look at the things that you haven't looked at before, because selling more feels good. Marketing more feels good, but that's not always going to solve the actual true reason behind the bottleneck, and sometimes it just makes it worse. So this wraps up our latest installment of Biz Ops Exposed. I just want to say thank you both to you, Gwen, and to Sonia for sharing your expertise today, for helping these CEOs who submitted questions really dig deep into the hows and whys of their problem. Now, if you're watching or listening and today's discussion sparked a question, or you're seeking to transform your business operations for better efficiency and profitability, I encourage you to reach out to Gwen or Sonia directly. I would love for you to join us next time as we tackle the tough topic of business finances. Yeah, we're going to go there, folks. We're going to talk money next week. My name is Tonya Kubo, and I just want to thank you for watching and look forward to our next journey together in Biz Ops Exposed. Stay operational, and we'll see you in the next episode.